Hello everybody. One of the best ways to become a better 3D modeler is to periodically give yourself small modeling challenges. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. So what I'm going to model is a paperclip. And it's not particularly difficult. It's not a particularly difficult form, yet it does require some problem solving. We have to figure out how we're going to tackle this challenge here. Now, one thing I really recommend doing, even when you're modeling the most common objects around you, is to do some visual research. So in the case of this paperclip, I did a Google image search to actually look at paperclips so that I could better understand their form. I would do this even if I were modeling a fork or a spoon or something simple like that that I use every day. Because even the most common things, sometimes we miss the details unless we do that visual research. So here's my visual research. I'm looking at this paperclip here and getting to understand its form. Let's go ahead and jump into Maya and try to model it. Now, before I begin, I would recommend actually pausing the video at this point and attempting to model the 3D paperclip yourself. In other words, coming up with your own solutions. And then resume watching the video a little bit later, and I'll show you a couple of my solutions. So let's go ahead and take a look at my solution number one. First thing I'm going to do is take a look at that image one more time of this paperclip here. And there's a couple forms on it that repeat. I look at some of these straight areas here on the paperclip, and then we also have these rounded areas. We've got 3 of these rounded areas on the paperclip, and I'm going to start with that in creating my paperclip. So I'm going to return to Maya, and we'll start modeling now. And to begin with, I am going to create a torus. Now, when you first create your torus, what you can do is go to the channel box, or you could also do this in the attribute editor. You can do that here in the attribute editor as well. But I'm going to go to my channel box, to the inputs, the drop down here. And some of the things that we can do that are going to be very helpful, rather than just scaling the entire torus, we can actually adjust its radius. We can, of course, adjust its subdivision axes and its height segments. So I think I'll bring the height segments down just enough so that we can get a nice rounded form. Perhaps I could go with 8. Maybe that's enough. 8 sections around. And I'll go ahead and keep the subdivision axis on 20. I think that'll be a good number to get this nice rounded form here. But then the other thing I want to do is change the radius of this. You can see that the benefit of that, as opposed to actually scaling it, is that the radius of our torus grows, but the section radius, this section here, remains the same. We can make the radius bigger or smaller and keep that same radius here. Okay, so let's find a good number for this. I think I'll go with a radius of perhaps 3.5. So this will be the beginning of our paperclip. Now, if I duplicate this torus, one thing to take note of is that I cannot change its inputs, unless I do a duplicate special, and then I can, but we're going to work with just simple duplicates. So that's important. When you duplicate, you don't get the option, so I can't come in here and easily make those adjustments. But I can still make the adjustments to the original one, so that's what I'm going to do. Let me put this one back in the center, and we'll grab our original torus. Now with my original torus selected, I'll come in here and I'll change its radius once again. Maybe make it 4. So it's a little bit bigger. In fact, we'll just move these off of one another so you can see them a little bit better. Once again, I'm going to keep that original, but I'm going to duplicate. Go back to the original, and let's make that one a radius of perhaps 3. So if we just put all of these on top of one another, we get this. But what we can do is move them off of one another. Now, we actually don't need the full torus, so I'm going to go into component mode, and let me go to the top view where I can select this a little bit more easily, delete the faces on some of these. And now we'll start lining these up to create our paperclip. So I'm going to temporarily move this one over here. We know that this part here of this larger semicircle is going to need to join with this one here. So let's just line them up. That should be good. And I'll go ahead and move this down. And we'll do the same with this one as well. We'll line it up. And maybe move it up like that. The next thing we'll do is we'll select all 3 of these parts and combine them. So I'll go to my modeling toolkit and click on combine. So it becomes one single mesh. Now I'll select these edges on this semicircle here and these edges on this other one and bridge them. Do the same with this one and this one. And then I'll select these edges and these edges here and do an extrude. And in fact, if we want them to be the same, at the same, let's say, distance here, we can just bring this one down. And as you can see, our paperclip is looking pretty good at this point. Now, we have these caps that are open right now, so let's go ahead and select these edges here, and I will go to Edit Mesh, Fill Hole, or sorry, to Mesh, Fill Hole. We'll fill that one, and we'll do the same for this one. We'll select those edges, go to Mesh, Fill Hole. I'm going to select these edges here, and I'll select them here as well. and we'll put a bevel on it. Maybe increase the segments and reduce the fraction of it so that we get something like that. Now, this next step isn't entirely necessary, but I'm going to do it anyway. You'll notice that this face is composed of multiple edges, and what I'm going to do is divide it into quads. So I'm going to use my multi-cut tool to do that. And I'll do the same here. And more or less we now have our paperclip. Now we might want to do a couple more things to it. Right now we have these hard edges on it. We can easily just select the model, go to Mesh Display, and soften those edges, and that will make it look nicer. And if we needed to add resolution to it, because maybe we don't want to have, maybe this isn't rounded enough here, of course we could always come in here later and apply a mesh smooth to it. I'm going to undo that, however. So that's my first solution for modeling a paperclip. I hope the takeaway from all of this for you is that really we can create these complicated forms using the very basic tools that you already know, and that we can create it using Polygon primitives as a starting point. Let's go ahead and now take a look at a second solution for creating a paperclip. So now let's take a look at solution number 2. And for this one, I'm going to approach the problem a little bit differently. I'm going to use CV curves. So to create a CV curve, you go to Create, Curve Tools, CV Curve Tool. I do want to make sure that it is set to 3 cubic because that's what's going to give me nice smooth curves. And I think I'll turn on Snap to Grid for this so that I can get everything lined up nicely. Now just click in place using the grid actually to help me create this. And that should give us a reasonable curve for creating this paperclip. Take a look at it. Here it is. What I'm going to do now is create another CV curve, but this time I'll do it by going to Create, NURBS Primitives, Circle. And conveniently, it actually went right to the right place. It went right to the end of this CV curve tool because I started at the origin, but even if I hadn't, that wouldn't be a big deal. Actually, it'd be very easy because I have Snap to Grid on right now, but even without Snap to Grid on, if I turn off Snap to Grid, what I can do is turn on Snap to Curve. And then if I bring it very close to the curve, release, and then grab it again, you'll see I can snap it to anywhere on the curve now, anywhere on the curve. I'm going to bring it right to the very end of the curve there. Turn off Snap to Curve. rotate this 90 degrees. Maybe scale it in a little. And now, with this curve selected, and then my second curve selected, and to tell you the truth, I might get the order wrong. I sometimes mess that up. I'm going to go to Surfaces. Just so you know, I'm in my modeling tools here. I'm going to go to Surfaces, and we're going to extrude it along this curve. And here's what we get. Now, there are a couple settings in here that might help make this look a little better, because you can see there's some problematic areas like there and there. But with the surface selected, if we come over here to extrude type, instead of flat, we can set it to tube. The convenient thing about this is that we currently have history on this, so if I select that NURBS circle there, you can see that I can actually still make adjustments to it. Here's what it looks like right now. In fact, I should point out also, not only can we, with the history, adjust the circle here, we can even come in and adjust the original paperclip curve as well, go into its components, and we can still adjust them as well. Actually, I have the components for the actual surface selected now, so let me change that. I'm going to select my curve and press F8. So what you'll see here is that we can actually still come in here and further refine the shape of our paperclip. Now, there are a couple things, however, about the paperclip that we should take note of. First of all, that its normals are reversed right now. That's why it's black. So if we go to, with the object selected, we go to Surfaces, and we find reverse direction. We can flip that. The other thing to take note of is that this is actually currently a NURBS object. It's not a polygon object, so it behaves very differently than a polygon object. But we can easily convert it into polygons. So here's how we would do that. With the model selected, I'm going to go to Modify, Convert, and we're going to go to NURBS to Polygons, and I'm going to open up this Tool Settings box. Now, I'm going to reset this just so I can show you what the default settings are, and then I'll show you my preferred setting. So instead of doing the default settings, which will give us this, what I'm going to do is select my model, and I'm going to check control points. Now, watch what this does. I'll apply it, and we get this, which doesn't look very great, but what we can do is take that model, come over here to our modeling toolkit, and do a smooth on it. And we'll get this. And like the other example, we can come in here and we can cap it off by filling those holes and putting a bevel on it and all of that. I guess the one thing I would say about the way I've worked with this right now is that it's a bit dense, I think in particular, with the number of edges we have coming around it like that. That's probably a little denser than what I'd like, but we could change that with some cleanup or with some of the conversion process of taking it from a NURBS mesh to a polygon mesh. One other thing about this particular solution that I don't really like is you can see here, even though we set it to tube, it just seems to unnaturally get a little narrow right here around that bend. It does the same here as well. So I'm going to show you a third solution that is kind of a combination of the first and the second solution. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. Okay, so now we'll take a look at solution number 3. Let's get started. So similar to the first example, I'm going to start with not toruses, but circles. So I'll go to Create NURBS Primitive Circle. And we can come in here and we can change some of its parameters. We'll make it maybe a little bigger. This is going to be very similar to the, well, as I had said before, it's actually going to be kind of a combination of the first solution and the second solution. So now that I have my first circle, I think I'll duplicate it. Select my original circle, go into its inputs, go ahead and bring its radius in some. Go ahead and duplicate that. Select the original one again, and now we have our 3 circles. I'm going to select my first circle, and I'm going to select the edit points on it, and I'm going to select these 2 edit points right here. Go to Curves and Detach. We now have 2 half circles. Go ahead and get rid of that one. We'll do the same to this one now. Select its edit points, Curves, Detach, and we'll select our last one. Select those edit points, Curves, Detach, and now we'll start arranging them. So let's see, I need this curve here to join with this one here like that. So it doesn't have to be perfect, although we could get it perfect by using our Snap to Curve tool and moving the pivot point for this, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of eyeball it and line them up as well as I can, something like that. Go ahead and bring this down. And I'll select this one as well. It actually joins with that quite nicely already. So that should be good. Now what we're going to do is create the rest of the paperclip curves that we need here. I'm going to go to Create, Curve Tools. This time I think I'll use the EP Curve tool. I'm going to turn on Snap to Curve because that'll allow me to easily draw curves from, I'm using the left mouse drag right now and dragging on that first curve to the end of it for my first point, coming over here to this second curve, dragging on it to its end point, enter. Got a nice line now, a nice NURBS curve that's going to join these two sections here. Do that again. And I think I'll turn off the snap to curve now. We'll draw another curve though. Actually, let me take that back. I am going to keep snap to curve on temporarily. And oh, that should be good. And we'll draw one more. Currently I'm holding down Shift, just so you know. Shift keeps it on this, keeps it lined up with this point here, the first point that I drew. And we'll press Enter. Oops. Okay, I didn't mean to add that other point, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and just get rid of it. There. Actually, I didn't do the best job with this because we actually want this part further down, don't we? Well, we can go ahead and adjust that. Just bring that down. Select its edit point and move it over here. Try to snap it to that curve. There we go. A little tricky. And there we go. That'll be better. So now that we have these curves, I'll select them. And we might run into a little problem here, we'll see. But I'm going to select all of them. And what I'm going to do, actually I don't know if this is going to work. Let's see, I'm going to go to Curves, and I'm going to Attach. And let's just see if that worked. Actually, it looks like it did. Look at that. We've got now, we still have all the original curves, but now we also have this single curve that's going to work very nicely for creating our paperclip. One thing to keep note of, though, is that you can see that it still has history on it. So if we don't want that history, what we can do is we can select this curve, go to Edit, Delete by Type History. Now, if we make adjustments to these other curves here, these original curves, it won't affect this one here. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and just delete those. I don't really need them anymore, so we'll just delete them. So if you remember with the second solution, what we did was we created another NURBS curve, a circle, and then we extruded it along the length of our paperclip form. This time we're going to do something a little bit different, actually a solution that I prefer to that second solution. So let's take a look at how we're going to accomplish this. So with my NURBS curve selected, what I'm going to do is come over here to Generate, Curve Utilities, and I'm going to attach a brush to the curve. And here's what I get. Now this is interesting because this itself is not a polygon object and it's not a NURBS surface either. It is a paint effect. But we can do some interesting things with it. So let's check it out. I'm going to go to the attribute editor while I have it still selected. And what I'm going to do is go to the default brush tab, to the brush profile, and I'm going to change its brush width because I think this is a little too thin. So we'll just increase that. You see we can increase, decrease it, and I think that should be pretty good. If you need more resolution on it, you can also go to this other tab, and you'll notice that we've got a sample density. I can bring that down. If I want it to be lower resolution, I can bring it up if I want higher resolution. I think I'm going to leave it like that. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, as I had mentioned, is that this is actually not a NURB surface, and it's not a polygon object either. If I were to right-click on this, you see I just do not get those selections of vertices, edges, faces, and so on. But, very similar to the NURBS surface that we created earlier, I can convert this to a polygon object as well. And that's what I'm going to do. So, I have my paint effect selected. And what I'm going to do is go to Modify, Convert. Remember that this is a paint effect, so Paint Effects to Polygons. I'm going to reset this so I can show you my preferred setting. If I apply this now, you'll see I get a bunch of triangles. I'm going to undo that. I prefer to select Quad Output and then Apply. This is now a polygon object. You can see that I can also select the faces, the edges, and so on, and work with it as any other polygon mesh. Now, a couple things I would probably do would be create a new material for it. And I think, like the first example and the second example, we're going to want to cap the ends by selecting those faces there, sorry, the edges, and then coming over to Mesh, Fill Hole. We can go ahead and do that bevel on it as well. Maybe add a segment to it, change the fraction. And while I'm at it, maybe I'll go ahead and use my multi-cut tool to make that cap 2 quads. Oops, don't know what I did there, but there it is. And here is my paperclip. So we looked at 3 different solutions for creating a paperclip. The first solution, I'm sure, was all tools that you were already familiar with. And to tell you the truth, of the 3 solutions, my preference is the first solution, the simplest solution, where we started with just some simple polygon toruses. Simple solution, but an effective one. Anyway, again, I think that these small modeling challenges can be very, very useful for building up your modeling skills. You can get them done quickly, and yet they still require some creative and technical problem solving. So I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.